Hi there, welcome to the Working Actor on Casting Workbook. I'm Natasha Gargiulo and we are at the Whistler Film Festival where we are meeting up with tons of talented people who have a love for film or they're making film, which they can be both. And here we are with the Canadian Tom Cruise himself. We call him that here, but his real name is Scratch Mitchell. And he is a producer, a fighter pilot, and an actor. And he's here to tell us all about his incredible journey into the filmmaking world, which is so fascinating. So welcome to the Working Actor.
Thank you so much.
You know, when I was doing some research about you and I was finding out about your story, I was fascinated on how easily it seemed that you transitioned from the world of aviation into acting.
Yeah, easy might not be the exact term, but it's interesting that it seems like an unlikely transition to go from being a fighter pilot to going into entertainment. But what I do tell people is that I was the commander of the Canadian Forces Snowbirds, the Blue Angels of Canada. And while I was there, I was basically doing live entertainment, and I was a producer, and I was talent in that. It was a live entertainment show. And so I thought of, well, maybe I can tell stories in a different way and on the screen rather than in the sky. And so it actually wasn't a big transition for me to conceive of it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, when you think about when you think about pilots and you think about the work that you have to do, it's a dangerous sport if we really have to be honest about it. So what made you get involved in that?
In fighter pilot?
Yes.
In the first place? Well, I kind of came about it naturally in the sense that I'm a third generation fighter pilot. My grandfather, Fred, was a Spitfire pilot in World War II in Europe. My dad was a Cold War pilot in Canada, and I just grew up with aviation in my blood.
Yeah.
And as a kid, there were two things I did. I made model airplanes and flew them around things, but I also stole my dad's 8mm camera and would make them fly down strings of fishing wire and try to film them. And so there was, at an early age, like 7 years old, I was already thinking of combining aviation and filmmaking.
So you were already a Spielberg at the time, you really were, and Tom Cruise as well. So making your own movies that young. Tell me a little bit about how people started, I guess, finding you and wanting to your help in making movies. For example, Midway was shot in Montreal, and they flew you down to Montreal, and you were there basically helping on the set. So tell me about that experience.
Well, it started just over 10 years ago. I conceived of a TV series idea, co-conceived of it with a producer that I knew at the time. It was called Air Show. It's still called Air Show. It airs on Amazon Prime now in the States and Discovery in Canada. And that really was my entry point into the film and television world. And I was talent in the show, and I was one of the producers, eventually one of the directors of this show. And I think after that, I just started developing a name for, I'm the aviation guy, certainly in Canada, but then because I work in the States as well as an airshow pilot, the word started getting around. And Roland Emmerich and his crew called me up and said, hey, Scratch, we hear you're like an airplane guy. Do you want to come down and
describe
work with
that
us?
feeling, what it's like when he calls you and you receive that call.
It's pretty cool because I grew up watching his movies, right? Independence Day, and the chance to be working directly alongside, you know, an iconic filmmaker was really quite eye-opening for me and very rewarding professionally.
Right, right. So when you're working on set with all of these actors and you're teaching them basically how to fly the jets and how to be, you know, the pilots, there must be that feeling that, well, I can do this, so maybe I'm going to put myself in a movie one day, or maybe I want to do that. So when were you struck by that feeling?
Well, it is, and I guess in self-interest, I do design projects that I can be in, because what I discovered as a young fighter pilot, there was a little bit of a performer in me. And actually, I'll tell a little bit of an embarrassing story here. So fighter pilots, we try to pretend we're pretty cool guys and gals.
No, you guys are cool.
Well, we would never, you know, and so it's like, it's very alpha kind of banter around the locker room. But it came out through my sisters that I used to street dance for money as a teenager. And so looking back, there's always been a little bit of a performer in me. And so the leap to go from flying jets to performing in front of millions and millions of people to now putting myself occasionally in some of my productions, it may be self-interest, but it also fulfills that little scratches that itch for me.
Absolutely. You were saying that you produced and directed one of your own features for the Discovery Channel. Sorry, what was that?
That was a TV series.
That was a TV series.
Yeah.
A lot of actors like to make the transition into producing and directing and maybe pitching their own concepts. What was that experience like for you, and how did you get them to say, yes, we want to do this?
I think I was told something early on. It was make yourself indispensable to the production that you're making, and in my case, as the nexus to the airshow industry, but also I was one of the performers, so I was able to control the narrative of what we were doing on camera, and so naturally I had to be in front of the camera as well as behind it.
Right.
And it's very fulfilling. It's very busy to do
Yes.
that, but
Yeah.
very fulfilling.
Share my life in aviation.
So the L-39, this is an airplane I was taught to shoot down.
Getting vertical.
And up we go, lots of Jeep.
Pulling big G's at air shows.
Camera rolling,
Behind the scenes, shooting movies in the air.
hold steady, and cut. Nice take.
They don't make this easy. I'm going in circles.
And in the wilderness, tracking down forgotten wrecks.
I think I found the big piece.
So what brings you to the Whistler Film Festival?
Well, I'm here with a couple projects, and I co-wrote a feature film that's gaining some attention right now. It's a true story of a Canadian bush pilot. So here we go again. There's an aviation theme in everything I do. It's ultimately a fatherhood story, which is a theme in a lot of what I do, being a father and
Yeah.
having a father. And so I'm starting to circulate that now that we're at a really good point in the script. And then I have another short film, and so I'm just feeling out the market here a little bit,
Right.
and meeting some old friends, of course. Whistler, gosh. Who doesn't love Whistler?
Well, you were born and raised in Vancouver, correct?
I grew up in Victoria.
In Victoria.
And so now I call Bowen Island my home, and moved over to the island there just with a lot of the other creatives in
Sure.
Vancouver area.
Well, there are so many creatives here, and it's such a great networking, place to be at. So, tell me a little bit about your experience while you're kind of like now on the other side of it. You're not in front of the camera, but you are pitching to people. So, what is that experience like?
It is unique
Yes.
because on one hand, when I used to audition, and I studied with a number of acting coaches in Vancouver, great ones, and you go to an audition and you have a job to do at that audition, but when you're pitching, you have to come in with everything
Yeah.
and your whole soul behind a project, and you have to articulate how you're going to make it, your vision. You have to have an understanding of the business model of things. So to pitch as a producer or creative producer, you really need to understand the industry, and that's something I've really been delving into at the same time. So there's that left-right brain balance.
Sure.
But it's still a performance.
It is a performance. You
Yeah.
always go back to it being a
Yeah.
performance. You have said that you have studied with some great talent coaches and agents. So what is some of the best advice or things that you learned from them?
Is find your own authenticity. And that's something that I've really sought to do, is digging around in my own soul and kind of what makes me tick is something that resonates with me, and then you build on that. And so when I'm addressing something, whether it's playing myself in a hosting role, because as you know, hosting is a heightened version of yourself. It's still acting. You're still performing. And so that was an interesting revelation as I started doing some hosting work and some on-screen factual work, in a doc series. But authenticity and really finding out what makes you tick,
Yeah.
that's been the biggest revelation for me.
Hey, I'm Rob Scratch Mitchell, a third-generation fighter pilot and director for aviation scenes. Watch Mojo asked me to use my expertise and break down popular flight scenes from film. Today, we're looking at superhero movies. All right, let's see what we've got up first. Yes, X-Men 2. I remember this. So, obviously, tornadoes are trouble in any airplane.
Scratch Mitchell, is that your stage name, or was that a name that you were given when you were piloting these fighter jets?
Yes, so I'll never tell, but I will tell. Every fighter pilot gets a silly name,
Okay.
and unlike the movies, like Mavericks and things like that, you don't get
Scratch is sexy, it can
Well,
be.
you see, so there's two things that came from that. Is they typically try to give you a name that you're not happy with, and it's usually for something you've done wrong.
Oh, I
So-
didn't know that.
Oh yes, it's you don't get to name yourself, and typically it's from something you've messed up. And so in my first week on squadron as a baby fighter pilot at 23 years old, I scratched the canopy of an F-18 fighter jet really badly on an air-to-air refueling tanker boom, and I was forever known as a scratch man. But then I knew this because my grandfather and my father are fighter pilots. I knew that the name you don't want's the one they give you, and so they had all these other names, but they said scratch man, scratch.
Yeah.
I'm like, I could live with that. And I went, so I gamed them. I said, no, that's terrible. It's like dermatology.
Yeah.
And so they're like, scratch it is. So
Yeah,
it's-
no, Scratch Mitchell is very cool. I love that. You know, we watch movies like Top Gun and Midway, and we all feel that exhilaration when we watch those scenes, right? And some of us, our stomachs are turning. Some of us are like, oh, I would love to do that. Can you describe that feeling of what it's like to actually get into one of those jets and take off?
It's one of the most magical experiences, and I wish everyone could do it because
Yeah.
unlike flying in a regular airplane, you actually strap a fighter jet on, and typically the wings and everything are behind you, so you're projected out into the airflow and feeling like you're actually not connected to the jet because it's all behind you. So you do have this great sense of being propelled through the air and not disconnected to what you're flying in.
Right.
It feels like part of the body. And yeah, there's crushing G-forces and there's exhilaration from that, and it's a physical workout. When I used to fly an air show routine with the snowbirds, we'd sweat 2 to 3 pounds out in a show.
Really?
It's huffing and puffing.
Right.
And but the sheer exhilaration of that it can't be described truly because you have to experience it.
Sure, I'm just trying to get into the mindset of an actor who is in one of those scenes and they have to get into the jet, and you are coaching them on how they should feel and what they should do. That's a lot to absorb, right?
It is, and that's what I was doing when I was coaching the actors in Midway, working with many of them, just teaching them like how does it feel and what's that physicality of being there, because it's a very physical role, and it's not like driving a car where just your hands are doing this. You really have to feel it, and the violence of the movements and how significant that is, and the G-force, how it crushes you down into the seat, and how that might make you talk funny.
Right.
And it's so creating this sort of environment of that world, being in a cockpit of a fighter airplane, and the pressure of being shot at, and the multitasking of constantly looking at things. You know, I had a great moment with Ed Skrein in that movie where he was trying to get his sense of place in the cockpit, and I described to him, I said, yeah, you're being cocky in this moment, but at the same time, every pilot is always thinking, what's going to kill me next? And I said, you might run out of fuel. That fuel gauge is down by your right knee. You might not find the aircraft carrier. It's somewhere over your left hand.
Terrifying.
Think about that when you're doing your scene.
Right.
And sure enough, you have something to gravitate to. So creating that sort of those physical realities of the scene is important when doing a flying scene to create authenticity.
Yeah, I'm so interested in this conversation, and I've had such a great time getting to know you. And what's up next for you? I know that you're here pitching, but you also have a documentary that you are working on, or a film that you're working on.
I do. I'm really hoping to do a documentary on wildfires.
Okay.
And so I created, over the past year, I took one of my airshow jets and we strapped a preposterously expensive camera pod to it, and we're using it for aerial cinematography now, for the likes of Top Gun and things like that.
Yes.
That's the caliber of the vehicle that we just made. And so, hey, I have this toy.
Yeah.
I want to go play with it. So I'm creating productions that I can use my own film jet with it. And so I have a really cool Korean War concept. It's a redemption story. I might put myself in it. We'll see.
you have to put yourself in it
I'll
now.
audition myself.
Yeah.
If I don't cut it with the peers, I'll gladly step aside. But again, it's using fighter jets and cameras. That's what I love doing. And my bush pilot movie. And so there's a number of things going on right now. It's a busy time.
How inspiring. Very good busy, right?
Yeah.
We know a couple of casting directors and agents that we can help you get that role if you want to cast yourself in your own film.
Yeah.
But until then, we hope to see you and your jet in Top Gun 3 and all the other movies that are coming out. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.